Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Foxy Business Hour, where we bring on business owners and subject matter experts to give small business owners the information they need to make decisions. Today, we have an amazing presenter, Wes King from We Insure. I've used him for a couple of years now, and he's helped me with my insurance for my business and my personal. And I think you will get a lot of information on this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, LaDonna. All right. So my name, as she said, I'm Wes King. I'm with We Insure Premier Group. We do all of your personal insurance and then your commercial insurance stuff. We are going to talk today about commercial insurance. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here with you guys. We can see this. And share that. All right. So as you can see here, this is who we are. Commercial insurance, protecting what you've built, Commercial Insurance Florida. It's kind of a complete guide, a breakdown for Florida business owners for what they need. And so I kind of want to start out a little bit here, just saying what we're going to cover. So we're going to go over Florida's business and risk landscape, what it looks like, um, the insurance market, what's changed 2024 to 2025, coverage types every business needs. So from general liability to workers' compensation, commercial auto, fleet coverage to your specialty lines. And then also Florida specific requirements. So state mandates, compliance, legal obligations, things like that you may need specifically for Florida. And then we'll go over some premium drivers, how to reduce your cost, lower some of your cost for your commercial insurance. And then just some risk management strategies, things that you can do as a business owner to help manage your risk and make sure that your premiums are as low as possible and you still have the good coverage that you need. Um, so let me go here. So a little bit about us. Um, we're an independent agency. We serve Florida businesses with access. We've got over 40 plus top rated carriers. We give you some real choices, not just, hey, here's the one option you've got. And our mission is kind of to match Florida business owners with the right coverage at the right price. No surprises, no gaps, no guesswork, right? We are based in Lutz, Land O'Lakes, but we serve all of Tampa Bay and all of Florida. So we're not just tied just to this area. If you have a business up in the Panhandle, we can help you. If you've got multiple locations across the state, we can help you. So Florida's business economy, just kind of wanted to give a brief overview of that by the numbers. You've got roughly 2.8 million small businesses in Florida, right? With that comes 3.6 million employees at those small businesses. We're the third largest state economy in the US. And our annual GDP just for the state of Florida is 1.3 trillion. So Florida's economy highly depends on the entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs depend on making sure they've got the right coverage. So Florida's risk reality is that it has hurricanes, right? As you can see here, this is hurricane landfalls from 1851 to 2024. A lot of people think that Andrew is probably the most dangerous storm that we've had. But as you can see, Hurricane Ian that happened in 2022 was a category 4, actually had the biggest loss. It was 113 billion in total economic losses just from that storm. Just to give you an example of that, most of you can remember 2024 season. Helene and Milton struck just 13 days apart, and that was between 34 to 54 billion in loss estimates. So, and just to give some historical there, let's get back to that. You can see Andrew was 57 billion. So it was half of what Hurricane Ian was. And then Irma was 77 billion, and that was in 2017. So every storm reshapes your commercial property premiums. Hurricane risk is the number one factor in pricing insurance in Florida for property. So a little bit about what's going on with Florida's insurance market, 2024 to 2025, what we're seeing trends. The admitted market was about 14.3 billion. Surplus lines, which is like your excess carriers, Lloyd's of London, Scottsdale, Western World, those carriers was 7.4 billion. So half of what we had was pretty much going into the surplus lines market. 34.2% of the market share up from 2020, which was 29. 20 new carriers we've seen enter the 20 plus new carriers we've seen enter the insurance market since 2024, 2025. And then we're finally starting to see some stabilization. So rates right now, average rate increase is about 1% in 2025, which totally stabilizes from what we've seen. I mean, you can see brutal premium spikes, 14 to 28% is what we were seeing basically from 2020 to 2024. So we started to see some restored confidence in the market, some surplus lines growth, and the rate increases are almost near flat now. So now's the time to shop your coverage if you haven't done it. Just another slide so you can kind of see what was going on. This was 2021, 2022. You can see the increases every year, and then 2024 going back down, 2025 way down. And we suspect that trend is flattening out right now. So there were some legislative reforms that took place in 2022. And that's when we started to really see insurance rates get better for commercial businesses as well as personal. One of those was the assignment of benefits. So essentially, what would happen is you might have someone knock on your door or your business and say, "Hey, we've seen you had some damage from the storm. We can work with your insurance company and get that all taken care of for you. Sign this little form and we'll take care of it." And essentially, what you were doing is you were assigning all the benefits of your insurance policy to the contractor. So they would go and you could see that claim getting higher and higher a lot of times because the contractor, obviously, they want to get more money, right? So this closed that loophole and they eliminated that assignment of benefits. Now you can work with a contractor to get stuff, but the contractor doesn't basically take the rights to your policy. The other thing that changed was attorney fee reform. So typically there was a one-way attorney fees, made Florida a litigation magnet. And then this basically what they did is it eliminated the incentive structure that was driving these billions of dollars in excess of lawsuit abuse against the insurance companies. When you looked at statistically what was going on, Florida was responsible for almost 70% of the litigation that was going on against the insurance companies. This kind of stalled that out. Then what we saw is in 2023, because of these reforms, we started to see reinsurance support and some market stability. Also, the state created a reinsurance to assist policyholders program, and that helped strengthen Florida's hurricane catastrophe fund and also restore some carrier confidence, right? So more carriers wanted to come and do business. With that, some commercial properties were insured through Citizens Insurance through the state of Florida. What all of this reform did is it accelerated that depopulation from Florida and put more policies back on the private market. And that essentially reduced the taxpayers' exposure to catastrophic loss, right? So Florida's top 50 property insurers collectively earned profit for the first time in 2023, first time in 7 years. And we started to see carriers stop leaving the state. So we'll move into kind of the commercial blueprint and what you need to look at. These are 6 essential coverages every Florida business owner should understand. The first one being general liability. So general liability is your first line of defense. It helps cover things like bodily injury, property damage, legal defense costs for third-party claims. This is probably the most essential and the number one coverage that people purchase when they get coverage for a business in Florida, right? The second thing is commercial property. So this protects your building, your equipment, your inventory from damage or loss, especially in Florida's storm environment. This is where you'll want to get your coverage for. Even if you don't own the building, let's say you lease the building, but you've got all of your equipment inside of there, you still want to make sure that that stuff's covered. We can get that underneath your commercial property coverage. It is high cost in Florida. right? We're the number one exposed, our number one exposure is hurricanes. Um, the third option we'll go over is a business owner's policy. This business owner's policy is for like small offices, things like that that can qualify. These are great for sometimes for accounting offices, insurance offices like us, where you can get your general liability, you can get your commercial property, all bundled into one policy. And it includes a lot of times business interruption coverage. So hurricane comes through and shuts your business down for 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, and you need to get some coverage to get that cost. You can get that in through there. Last one, state required, not last one, but the fourth one, state required is workers' compensation. So state required for most Florida employers covers workplace injuries, medical costs, lost wages. And we'll go over kind of what's required, who's required to carry that. And then commercial auto required for all business vehicles. So if you have a business vehicle and let's say you've got a wrap on your vehicle. This is where you're going to want to make sure you've got, commercial auto coverage. You're a contractor, you've got vehicles going to and from work sites, things like that. You want to make sure that you have that. Florida has the highest uninsured driver exposure rate in the country. So definitely important. And then finally, we'll go over kind of like the specialty lines, which is flood, windstorm, cyber, your E&O, D&O, your EPLI, Florida specific coverages based on your industry's unique exposures, right? So not everybody needs these coverages, but I can tell you cyber is one of the big ones, one of the new ones that I think every business owner should have. So general liability, we'll dive into that. It's kind of your foundation of your business, right? It's kind of what I tell people. Um, it covers bodily injury to third parties, right? So property damage you cause, personal and advertising injury, and legal defense costs. So those are the big things. Florida reality, contractors, retailers, service businesses, they face the highest general liability exposures in the state. Their risk is above the national average. So if you're a contractor, a tradesperson, a merchant, or a service-facing business, you've got a pretty big risk in Florida, and it's way above the national average. So definitely need to have general liability. Then you've got some contract requirements. If you have a commercial lease for your space, certain clients will require proof of general liability before you can operate or before they'll even pay you. Um, Landlords and your clients are going to demand this coverage. Make sure you have it, right? Like I said, Florida ranks among the top 5 most litigious states in the nation. So it's not an optional coverage, it is essential. Just to give you a real world scenario here, I've kind of put this down here. Customer slips and falls in your retail store. Without general liability, you paid the $200,000 plus judgment entirely out of pocket, plus your legal fees, court costs, lost time running your business. If you've got general liability that's applicable to cover you for this, all that's going to come from your coverage. This is why it's one of the most important coverages out there. And someone asked if you can get insurance on your equipment in your offices at home. Yes, you still can. So just know that you can do that. Typical cost for most small businesses, roughly $49 a month. So it's not a real big cost for most businesses, but it's going to vary depending upon your business. If you're a roofer, you're going to pay more than that. You're right. If you're a plumber, you're probably going to pay more than that. As I said right here, Florida reality, contractors, retailers, and service businesses face that highest exposure. If you're someone like me who has just an office space, you're probably going to be closer to that $49 a month for some small business insurance. Average slip and fall judgment in Florida when tried in court, $200,000. So think about that. What would that do to your business if you weren't carrying that coverage? 2.8 million Florida small businesses, they're all exposed if they don't have general liability. And even where it's not legally mandated, general liability is typically required to sign leases and win contracts in Florida. So you want to make sure that you're definitely getting that coverage for your business. We'll move over to workers' compensation. This is kind of the Florida's strictest requirement. So who has to have it? I get this question all the time. Do I have to have workers' comp? If you have 4 or more employees in any non-construction industry, you're going to be required to carry it. So you could be in an office like mine, not required to carry it. As soon as you hit 4 employees, you're going to be required by the state to carry that coverage. Any employee in construction, even just one worker, triggers mandatory coverage. Now, I do have some trades guys that are one-man shops. You can file for a workers' comp exemption and exempt yourself if you're a one-man shop. However, the minute you add a regular employee, you're going to be back to being required to carry that coverage. Agriculture. So Florida's a big agricultural state. We've got a lot of farmers, a lot of ranchers. 6+ regular workers, it's required. If you have 12 or more seasonal workers, it'll be required. Subcontractors without their own coverage may be legally counted as your employees. What does this mean? I get this a lot from my guys that work in the trades. They might be plumbers. I'll tell you, I've got some general contractors, and they sub out a lot of their work, and they go, "Well, that's not my employee." You need to make them show you that they either have workers' comp or a workers' comp exemption. If they don't, we're going to count them on your workers' compensation, and we're going to need to list them as employees, and we need to know their payroll, right? I can tell you sometimes it's cheaper to get that, depending on your industry, right? You could be in the roofing industry. Sometimes it's better to get that workers' compensation through your PEO or your payroll company. And they can do pay, most of them can do pay as you go. Some people do quarterly, some people do monthly, and it's based off of your payroll. So you'll need to report that. And it's also auditable, meaning let's say you tell me you have 200,000 worth of payroll, and then at the end of the year, when they audit you, you have 600,000. Guess what? They're going to pay for that additional 400,000 in order to keep your coverage going. So it's always good. Keep that up to date. Like I said, I suggest if you can't get it through us, or it's better to get it through a payroll company, they can keep track of that. Someone asked me about workers' comp on 1099 contractors. Do they count? What about foreign remote workers? Possibly. If they're a 1099 subcontractor, they are going to count as an employee. However, again, same thing's going to be right here. 4+ employees in any non-construction industry. So if it's non-construction and you're still less than 4 employees, you're okay. If you're in that construction industry, just one is going to trigger that mandatory coverage. Consequences of not complying. Stop work order. That shuts your business down immediately, right? Last thing you want to do is have someone from the state come in and say, "Hey, sorry, we're going to shut you down because you don't have workers' comp." And then you've got to try and get it. You can be fined up to $1,000 a day for non-compliance. If it takes you 4 or 5 days to get that coverage, that's $4,000 or $5,000. So those fees can accumulate pretty fast. 2,500 stop work orders are issued every year. So people go, "Oh, well, this doesn't happen very often." There's 2,500 a year that this happens. That's 7 businesses on average every day shut down because they don't have workers' compensation. If you don't have it, guess who's going to pay for all those medical bills for your injured workers? You're going to pay all of that out of pocket. Again, critical requirement. I like to put this on here because I have the construction guys in my business, and they like to always tell me that they don't have to carry it for their subcontractors. 1 employee equals mandatory coverage, no exceptions. Commercial property insurance. It is Florida's hardest market. The average annual premium for you to insure your commercial property in Florida is $5,527 a year. As you can see, the US national average, $2,285. So when you're talking about that per 300,000 worth of coverage versus 2,285 on the national average. So we're about almost double what the national average is. Someone asked on here, if their employees work from home, would you have to pay for workers' compensation? If they're an employee, and you have four or more and it's an office job, you're going to need to carry workers' compensation. Commercial property insurance, back to that. Hurricane risk category 5, 113 billion in total losses. Hurricane Ian reshaped commercial underwriting across Florida. And then you had Helene and Milton that paid 34 and 50, between 34 and 54 billion in losses. They're still working on some of that, so that's why that number is kind of like an in-between number. Some of those claims haven't been closed as of yet. But we are starting to see that market recovery. This is kind of what I was telling you. New carriers are getting approved by the state. By mid 2025, so just about a year ago, we added 14 plus companies. So you're seeing more carriers come into the market, right? Capital strength. So surplus capital increased by 6.5%. That helps stabilize the market. So as these carriers are actually showing profit, like I said, they were losing money for about 7 years. Most people don't understand that, but when they were losing money, now they're actually starting to get some of that back. First thing you talk about when you talk about commercial property, your buildings or your structure. So this can be the building itself, right? The walls, the roof, the foundation. You want to make sure that you have that at replacement cost. In Florida, on commercial policies, a lot of times there's an 80% co-insurance clause. So if you have property coverage, I always suggest you look at your policy and see what it says that your co-insurance clause is. It could be 80%, it could be even 100%. What that means is that you're required to insure your building to at least 80% of what it's going to cost to replace, or 100%, depending upon what your clause says. If not, and you have a loss, your payout could be way less based on what that clause is. So you need to meet whatever that percentage of that clause is in your policy. Business personal property. So this is what we talk about. Some people have this and they don't own a building. They don't own any structure, right? They just have stuff inside of a building that they lease. That's what this covers. It covers your equipment, your inventory, furniture, fixtures. Basically, you take the roof off of your building, you dump out all of your personal property that falls out, all of your business property that falls out. That's what you're going to need coverage for. I will tell you, it is probably the most often undervalued thing we see in commercial insurance. That being said, I always tell people, audit this at the end of the year. Usually that's when you're buying new equipment. People are trying to get tax write-offs, things like that. Make sure that when you buy this new equipment, you're adding coverage for it, right? You want to make sure that your stuff can be replaced at the time of a loss. Business interruption and extra expense. This pays lost income, fixed costs, while you rebuild after a covered loss. This is crucial in Florida, especially because we have hurricanes. It's probably the most overlooked coverage I see. This can be things like spoilage coverage. You own a restaurant, your hurricane comes through, and you're out of power for 3 weeks. You're probably going to lose that food that's in there. You can get spoilage coverage on there to cover some of that stuff, right? Business interruption. You weren't able to open your restaurant for 3 weeks, 2 months. I've seen in some cases 3 months. This will give you the coverage you need for that. Again, these are things I tell people, especially on commercial. You want to make sure you're shopping these annually to make sure you're getting the best rate. This is probably the best policy available that you can get. Again, it may not be available to every type of business out there. If you're a roofer, you're probably not going to get a business owner's package policy. However, if you're an office like mine, you're probably going to be eligible for this. So essentially what happens, a BOP policy, as we call it, or a business owner's policy, typically gives you three coverages in one policy. So it gives you your general liability, right? Gives you your commercial property, and typically gives you your business interruption. Get all of that at a combined discounted rate. Again, it's not going to be for everybody, but if you have a small little office, something like that, these are great for those. On average, about $141 a month. Save 10 to 20% versus buying all of that stuff separately. This is typically best value for businesses that are doing under 5 million in revenue. So this is what we think of when we think of most small businesses. Business interruption coverage. Again, this pays for your lost income and operating expenses. That could be rent, payroll, loan payments, if a covered loss forces you to close your office. Who qualifies? Sometimes you can get this for retailers, offices, restaurants. It says contractors and service businesses. It's going to be very limited when you're looking at contractors, depending upon what you're doing, may or may not work, right? A lot of my roofing contractors, they're not going to fit this. A lot of my plumbing contractors, they're not going to fit this. Typically, you have to have a fixed location, and it is Florida critical. Business interruption is essential. 6-week closure after hurricane without it could permanently close your business, right? If you're not getting income for 6 weeks, what are you going to do, right? Even if the physical damage of your building is covered, where's your income coming from? What are you going to do with all of your other stuff? So pretty important. And like I said, I just touched some basics. And then this way, if anyone has any questions, I'm here to answer them and you can reach out. Professional liability, E&O. This is for mainly for service-based Florida businesses. So any business providing advice, consulting, design, professional services. So these are going to be like me, an insurance firm, right? Accountants like LaDonna, architects, IT firms, marketing agencies, healthcare providers. Those are the ones who really want to do this. We've got a question here. Shopping annually for rates policies. Should we shop with captive agents or agents that have access to multiple carriers? So I will tell you my thing that I recommend to everybody, shop the independent agent because they're not going to have just one option, right? They're going to have multiples. And so if you can shop with them, they can shop several different markets and usually you're going to find the best rate doing that, right? What does general liability not cover? Obviously, I said it's the most important coverage, but it does not cover errors in your professional work. That means missed deadlines, negligent recommendations. General liability covers for physical injury and property damage only. So this professional liability is going to pick up for those errors in your professional work if you miss a deadline, if you give some type of negligent recommendation, right? Average errors and omission claim cost between $50,000 and $300,000, depending on the industry. Architectural, medical, those typically reach the high end. So when I'm talking about like your construction guys, your plumbers, your trades guys, they're typically they will have some exposure there, but not as much as like your accountants, your medical people, your insurance people. Those claims are going to be on the high end. Claims made versus occurrence. So most errors and omission policies are claims made, meaning coverage has got to be active when the claim is filed, not just when the event occurred. If your policy is lapsed, you've typically lost coverage, right? Tail coverage. So this is typically what you get for a retiring professional. So basically, let's say I decide I'm going to purchase someone else's office and roll them into my insurance agency, right? Or LaDonna decides she's going to buy another accountant shop and roll it into her office, right? So what this does, it extends that errors and omission coverage after the policy ends. So any of the prior work remains protected against future claims, right? So if I'm buying someone's office or if LaDonna wants to buy another accountant's office, it's we definitely recommend that the prior whoever you're purchasing it from purchases this coverage for you, and then that helps protect that book of business that you're purchasing against any future claims. Just to give you a real scenario, IT firm in Tampa misconfigures a client server, causes 180,000 in data loss and business disruption. The client sues for the full amount. No E&O coverage, but you have a general liability policy, they're going to deny the claim. Full $180,000, you're going to pay out of pocket, right? If you had errors and omission coverage, then the legal defense and the settlement is covered underneath that E&O. Your business continues to thrive without having to pay that out. General liability never covers your professional errors. Only your errors and omission policies will. Florida minimums and what you actually need. So this is kind of my fun thing. I've been in Florida for my entire life pretty much, other than doing some traveling. Florida minimums for insurance. It says dangerously low here. I'm going to say it's horribly low here, right? So when you look at commercial auto insurance, and that's mainly what I'm going over here, Florida does not require, it only requires personal injury protection at 10,000. That covers your own medical costs, regardless of who's at fault, right? 10,000 in property damage liability. So if you hit someone else's car, boat, house, whatever you hit, they're only going to cover up to 10,000. I don't know what vehicle you can buy for less than $10,000 right now, but there's not too many. So as you can tell, the minimum is very, very low. Florida does not even require bodily injury coverage, meaning if I'm driving my plumber's truck around and I hit somebody and I don't have bodily injury and they're hurt in that accident and they sue me for $100,000, I'm going to be responsible out of pocket if I'm not carrying that coverage. So basically, you remain financially responsible for all damages beyond these limits. Your personal and your business assets are at risk if you're carrying this minimum. Recommended limits for Florida businesses. Get real protection for what your business needs, right? Highly recommend 100,000, 300,000, or 500,000, what we call CSL. That basically means for any person who gets hit, that you hit someone, you're at fault, right? They'll pay up to 100,000 per person, up to 300,000 per incident, or up to 500,000 total if you have a combined single limit, right? These are the minimums that I recommend. Depending on what your business is actually doing, you may want to carry higher coverage. 100,000 in property damage liability. It's 10 times the state minimum, but it gives you actual coverage in real world events. Uninsured motorists. A lot of businesses don't carry this. I can tell you, 1 in 4 vehicles on the road are hit by someone who either doesn't have enough insurance, doesn't have insurance at all, or a hit and run driver. So this helps protect your employees when they're hit by one of those people. Hired and non-owned auto. This is probably one of the biggest gaps that I see in the trades, right? They have, oh, my employee's using his vehicle, he's going to the job site. That's just how I do it. If you don't have this coverage, you're not going to have coverage if that employee gets into an accident while they're essentially performing work for you. Sometimes, so I'm going to finish this and then I've got a question. So, hired and non-owned auto covers employees using their personal vehicles for business, right? Typically overlooked. One of the questions I'm getting is how much more do you pay for commercial than for personal coverage? So I can tell you it varies depending upon your occupation, depends on how many vehicles you have on the road, depends on how many drivers you have on the road. One of the interesting things with commercial right now is that I can tell you I've got a client who has like 7 vehicles on the road. They've got like 8 drivers. Every time they've added a driver, if that driver's been clean, their rate's actually going down a little bit. It might be $100 or $200, but it's going down as they're adding some of those drivers. Sometimes the commercial policy is less expensive, and you can typically get it for a year versus most of your personal auto policies are going to be 6 months, right? Here's the way that I tell it. If you're using your vehicle for business, other than you're like a realtor, something like that. If you have a wrap on your vehicle, get commercial insurance. Make sure you've got the proper coverage. I see a lot of landscape guys, and this is not to call them out, but this is what I see a lot of. I see a lot of landscape guys who, when I see their policy, have a personal auto policy. In the event that they're hauling a trailer with all their landscape stuff and their little sticker on the side that says Joe Smith's landscaping service and they get into an accident, most likely their personal lines policy that they have is going to decline to offer coverage. And then they're going to be footing that bill and their business is essentially going to be shut down, right? So Serious commercial accident, total damages can reach 500,000, 2 million really quickly. So definitely recommend it to protect it. Florida's the highest number one rate for uninsured drivers in the nation. So if you don't have uninsured motorists on your commercial policy, guess who's going to pay for that when an uninsured driver injures your employee? Florida specific coverages. These are some of the gaps, some of the stuff that I talk about. Separate policies typically are required for these. Flood insurance. If you're in a high risk flood zone, right? It's not included in your standard property policy. Florida has 20 of the top 25 most flood prone counties in the country. Make sure you get it, right? That'll give you, and flood, people always go, what's flood cover? What if a pipe breaks? Is that flood? No. Flood is rising water from outside the business that covers 2 or more acres of property or damages 2 or more structures. Windstorm, hurricane coverage. I can tell you windstorm coverage in Florida right now is super expensive. Like I said, the market is leveling out, but it's still costly. There's some places that you can't even get it, right? It's often excluded, sub-limited, meaning there might be a limit to what they'll cover for that. And that happens typically in your coastal zones right on the coast. Separate wind policy, if you're in one of those places, could be required. And then check for your named storm deductibles. I've seen some of these storm deductibles on some of these commercial policies now coming in with like 10% hurricane deductibles. I mean, you got a $500,000 building and you've got to pay 10% before the carrier picks up everything. That could be a $50,000 deductible. And then one of the questions I've got here, does the required insurance for a loan on properties get you fully covered? So I'm going to tell you the one thing I hate in insurance is fully covered. There's no such thing as being fully covered. Now, you can get as much as you want, right? As much as you think you need to protect. This is where risk management comes in, looking at, hey, what am I bringing in revenue? What are my expenses? What do I have? And making sure that you've got the proper coverages to cover as much as you can, right? Sometimes lenders will force place coverage on you. If you don't have this coverage in place and you have a loan on your building, they may say, guess what? You don't have coverage. Now we're going to charge you for it. Typically, it only covers the note. A lot of times it won't actually cover your property. Cyber liability coverage. So this is just so that you can see, because most people don't think that they need this. Florida businesses reported 100 million plus in cybercrime losses, and that was in 2024. That number is increasing every year. So that's data breach, ransomware, PCI compliance coverage, critical for all industries. And you see there, rapidly growing risk. I'm watching this go up every year. As an example, I have contractors who'll say, I don't need that cyber liability coverage. Well, what happens when someone phishes your email and they send your clients a $20,000 bill and one of your clients pays that bill, right? Who's responsible for that? This is where may need to make sure you have the cyber liability coverage. EPLI, Employment Practices Liability. This covers wrongful termination, harassment, discrimination claims. Florida businesses face some of the highest EPLI exposure in hospitality, retail, and the healthcare sectors. We have a lot of hospitality, a lot of retail in our state, and we're probably one of the biggest states for healthcare. So this is, people feel like they got wrongfully fired, they're getting harassed in the workplace. You want to make sure you've got the coverage for that. One of the questions, if I only use my phone to do business, do I really need cyber liability coverage? How easy is it for a hacker to hack into your phone, right? We're seeing AI now, people copying your voice, creating risk. So make sure you've got that, right? Employee practices liability for 1099 employees. As long as you've got the proper paperwork in there, then you should be okay, right? But what if you don't? And they are a regular employee, and then they say you wrongfully terminated them. This is where that coverage is going to come into play. Commercial umbrella. So some businesses, typically your higher end businesses, are going to need this, right? This extends. This is basically like your personal umbrella covers above and beyond what the basic limits of your auto, your homeowners, your boat, all that stuff are. In commercial, it extends above your general liability, your commercial auto, your employer liability limits. Million to 10 million relatively doesn't cost you a ton of money, but it's essential for high exposure businesses. Like I said, these are my higher end businesses, everything else. Operating in Florida's litigious environment. All right, so we got a question here. Yep. Someone just saying they require all their clients to have cyber coverage. Exactly what we would do. All right. Directors and officers protects your business leaders, right? If you're a director or an officer of that company, from personal liability for management decisions. This is critical for LLCs, corporations, nonprofits of all sizes. This gives you some personal asset protection as a director or an officer of a company, right? Again, this is a brief overview. This just kind of touches on things that you need to look at if you're a business owner. People always ask me, why is my rate so high? What's driving my cost here in Florida? One, number one, location. Coastal versus inland. Where are you at? What's the crime rate where you're at? How far are you from a fire station? These are some of the biggest impacts that cause your rate to drive in Florida. Industry and operations. Are you construction? Hospitality? They're going to pay significantly more than your office-based businesses because the elevated risk profiles are so much higher. Years in business and your claim history. If you've been clean, no claims, 3 to 5 years, they do these things called loss runs. Anytime you shop your commercial insurance, agent's probably going to ask for it, right? If you've been pretty clean, you can see a deduction in your premium, typically 15 to 25% less than what someone else is paying who's had losses. Every claim-free year is going to improve the tier of where you're at. Building construction. You got a concrete block building, or do you have a wood frame office, right? Roof age. How old is the roof? What type of material do you have on the roof? Hurricane mitigation features. A lot of people go, what is that? New roofs may have hurricane clips or straps on them. You may have a hip roof versus a flat roof. You may have a concrete reinforced roof on some of these commercial buildings. All of that stuff's going to help depending upon the carrier, right? Payroll and revenue. The more employees you have, the higher your revenue. You've got a larger exposure. You're going to pay higher workers' comp and general liability premiums. I always tell people, these are audited annually. So you don't want to lie to your insurance company and say, hey, I'm only doing 50,000 in sales and my payroll's at 40,000 and it really be 500,000, right? When they audit that, they're going to charge you back for that audited rate. The biggest thing you can do is your risk management practices, right? Any type of safety programs you have in place, training your employees, security systems, demonstratively reduce your premiums and improve your loss ratio. So security systems could be on your building, you're monitored for fire, burglar, all of that stuff. You can get a discount for that, and that's usually pretty significant. If you understand these six things here, these will give you the power actively influencing your premium, helping bring it down or adjust it, not just accept, oh, my premium's this high, right? Location and building quality, two biggest features in Florida's market that drive that rate. These are 7 ways you can reduce your commercial premium in Florida, right? Bundle your policies. Workers' comp, auto, try and get it with one carrier if you can. Not all of them do it, right? But if you can do that, you're looking at on average savings 10 to 20%. If you've got commercial property, you improve your roof, new metal rated roofs, A lot of times that can significantly drop your premium. And sometimes it can help you get a lower hurricane deductible, right? It may not save you a ton on that on your premium, but if you can get a deductible that goes from 10% to 3%, that's still a savings, right? Wind mitigation features, touch on that briefly. Hurricane shutters, impact windows, reinforced doors, updated roof, all of that stuff. Formal safety programs. Documented safety training helps lower your workers' comp expense. They can put what they call a modifier on there, and usually that can help lower your score. Maintain a clean loss run. This is where I said every claim for a year moves you to that better tier. The biggest thing, shop the market annually. There were 20 new carriers entered Florida in 2024. Markets shifted drastically. Your 22, whatever you're paying in 22 rate is almost certainly not competitive anymore, right? If you haven't shopped your insurance, commercial insurance since 2022, now's the time to do it. And then someone asked us, work with a captive or work with an independent? Work with an independent agent. Just like us, we've got access to 40 plus carriers. Captive agents typically have one. In Florida's rapidly changing market, options matter, right? Key Florida insight. Your roof is your most important insurance asset in Florida. Carriers, they are starting to use satellite imagers, starting to use drones to assess it. Newer metal roof, newer tile roof, newer shingle roof can definitely significantly unlock property premium reductions and even give you more markets. Like I said, wind coverage in Florida has been pretty hard to get, but if you got a new roof, you're going to have way more options than someone who doesn't, right? Every step that I'm going over, this is all actionable stuff you can do today. If you haven't shopped your coverage in the last 12 months, leave money on the table. Building a risk management program for your Florida business. So this is something I recommend if you're any type of small business owner in Florida, even if you're a mid-sized business, right? Some of your big companies, your Fortune 500 companies, they've got these built in, right? They're doing it. Why don't you? Right? So first thing you want to do is you want to identify, catalog all your risk. What do you got? You got property, you got liability, you've got employees, you've got vehicles on the road, you've got to protect your data, your business interruption exposures across your whole operation. So identify what all of those are. What do you really have that's at risk, right? And then assess each risk, right? What's the probability that's going to occur versus what would it do to my business financially? Which risk could injure your business versus which ones could you manage, right? With maybe you don't need as much coverage for your cyber liability as you need for your general liability, right? Or maybe you need E&O coverage versus the general liability, right? So where can you get that? And then what can you control? Implementing this is what we're talking about: physical and procedural goals, safety, training, security systems, storm shutters, backup systems. These are all things that you can control to help lower your risk. And then you want to transfer that risk, right? You don't want to be responsible for all of it. So this is what you buy insurance for. Risk you can't self-insure, right? Walmart is a great example. They self-insure. They're not buying insurance somewhere, but they make millions and millions of dollars so they can afford to self-insure. If you're a company and you're doing 500,000 to 3 million in sales, 4 million in sales, probably not going to be able to self-insure yourself, right? So, and then monitor it. What does that mean? You don't have to look at your insurance every month, every week, right? But set a time once a year where you can do an annual review of your risk, adjust it as your business grows and the market evolves, right? And I keep going back to plumbing. One of my favorite clients is one of my plumbers, right? Start out, you got one truck on the road and two guys. 5 years down the road, you got six trucks, you got 12 employees. You went from doing 400,000 in sales a year, now you're doing 4 million in sales a year. You need to adjust your insurance to meet those needs. Risk management is not just for those large corporations, right? Every Florida business benefits. You have to have a systematic approach. Insurance is only one tool. It's not the only. It just helps offset some of that risk for you. Lastly, one of the things last I touch on is hurricane preparedness. We're in the middle of hurricane season right now in Florida. So, and I got this little tip here that I'll tell you based on my conversations with LaDonna here and what she's got in my chat here. Accounting tip: review your insurance at the end of the year when you're doing your business review. I think that's a good idea. Hurricane season before the storm. Map out what is your business continuity plan, right? Map out your operations, your key contacts, your recovery steps, what all you need to do before a hurricane hits, right? Document, photograph all of your business property. Last thing you want to happen is a storm comes through and you can't remember what you had in your office, right? Everything's been wiped out. Make sure you've got that stuff documented. Store records, data offsite or in a cloud backup. Protect it from physical loss, contracts, payroll, tax records, all that stuff, right? You have a hurricane comes through and it wipes out your whole building and all that stuff scattered over a few blocks. It's gonna be hard for you to find that, so make sure it's backed up. Know your policy numbers, your carriers, and your claims phone numbers. What I tell people is write this all down, save it on a file on your computer, save it to your phone. Then you've got all that stuff. Because guess what? When a storm comes and we lose power, you need all of that information as you can. I can tell you what's great, what I've seen with some carriers going to text messages during storms. You may not be able to make a phone call, but if you can get a text out, you can get that process started. The sooner you start reporting your claim, the better it is. Again, install storm shutters, secure outdoor equipment. Biggest thing I can see is people have got stuff outside their house, storm comes through, gets pushed around, or they got outside their business, and that stuff becomes a projectile, right? And then test your emergency communication plan, right? Power's out, everything else. How do I keep in touch with my employees, my vendors, my clients? Who calls? When do they call? Right? After the storm, what do you do once a hurricane hits? Document all the damage before you clean it up, right? I always tell people, if you don't document, how's the insurance company know what damage you had? Call your insurance company, write your insurance right away. Don't wait. If you wait, you could be jeopardizing coverage. Some carriers require you report it within a certain amount of days. And depending upon the coverage, may need to be reported within a certain amount of days. Mitigate further damage. Tarp a roof, board openings, right? You have a duty within your insurance policy, it's noted, to prevent any additional loss. Document that stuff. Track all your expenses for your business interruption claim. Receipts, if you have to move into a temporary space while your building is being fixed or the claim is being settled, document that. Any equipment you have to rent, document it. What's that look like? Any extra labor you have to pay, document that stuff, right? You might be able to put that underneath a business interruption claim if you've got that coverage. Again, you've got to purchase the coverage to get it. And then get multiple contractor estimates, right? What we see happen a lot of times when storms come through Florida, we get contractors from all over the country that come to Florida to make a buck. Florida's documented unlicensed contractor fraud after major storms several times running. So make sure you're getting multiple estimates. And then know your name storm deductible before you settle. Hurricane deductibles are typically a percentage of the insured value. That's where I said if you've got a, $500,000 building, you've got a 10% deductible, that's a $50,000 deductible. So know what that is. Florida law, hurricane claims must be reported promptly. Delays can limit your recovery. Agent first. Work with your insurance agent before accepting any settlement offer from the carrier. Once accepted, it's final, right? Once you accept that loss, it's final. We're not licensed agents, licensed adjusters, right? So we can't settle the claim for you. We can try and help you through that process and making sure you're being taken care of and you're doing what you need and reporting what you need. Florida business scenarios. This is real coverage situations, right? Restaurant in Tampa Bay, Category 3 hurricane comes through, damages the roof, flood water enters their kitchen, business is closed for 8 weeks, right? Without business interruption, 180,000 in lost revenue and 120,000 in repairs. That's $300,000 out of pocket, right? If you had a BOP coverage with flood coverage, repairs are covered, no lost revenue, and the business survives, right? Contractor in Sarasota, subcontractor falls on a job site. It's got 250,000 in medical and legal costs. The subcontractor wasn't carrying workers' compensation, and you didn't put him underneath your as an employee because you didn't know. You said, I don't have to put him there. He's a subcontractor, right? You're responsible for that $250,000 exposure. But if you had the correct coverage, your medical and legal costs could be covered minus any deductibles, right? IT firm over in Orlando, they get a ransomware attack. They lock their client data. They get sued for 200,000 in damages and lost business. If they had without cyber coverage and E&O, the general liability is not going to cover that data breach or the personal exposure, right? But if they had the proper cyber liability coverage and their E&O, legal defense and settlement would be covered. Their reputation's intact, and they retain that client, right? So these are great client retention tools when I say, here's what you need, right? Captive agent, I had a couple questions on this. Captive agent versus an independent agent. Here's why it matters more in Florida. Captive agent represents one company and only that company, right? You see this a lot if you go to State Farm, they're only going to offer you State Farm products, right? Independent agent, on the other hand, is going to have access to typically 40 plus carriers. They can shop the full market for you. Captive agent, they might have limited options. Their carrier might say, hey, sorry, we don't have any market for your type of business. We can shop the market as an independent and find the best coverage for your risk. Florida's a hard market. When it gets in a hard market in Florida, like it was for the last few years, right, up until recently, you only get one carrier stuck in disadvantage, right? Cannot shop the market for you when your carrier non-renews you. Your hands are tied, right? State Farm, Allstate does this, right? All of a sudden, your carrier says, sorry, we're not protecting that type of business anymore. We're not going to renew your policy. Good luck, right? We can quickly pivot on that for you, find a new carrier for you, and we work for you, not the insurance company. We advocate for you at the claim time, not the carrier. We're in your corner, right? We want to help you. We also work with the carrier, right? So find out what's going on with that. And again, you had 20 plus new carriers enter the market just over the last 2 years, right? Why Florida businesses choose us? This is my little self-advertising here, right? We're independent, we're unbiased. We've got 40 plus different carriers. We deeply know the knowledge and understand the Florida risk, right? There's some unique risk here. There's regulation that's required. There's some different market dynamics where you're based out of. You're coastal, you're inland, and we can handle almost all industries of business. Claims advocacy. We can go to bat for you if you have a claim. We may not be able to adjust the claim for you, but we can go to bat for you and try and help you out in that process. Annual coverage reviews. So we can do a coverage review for you every year, and we can proactively put that on your calendar, set that up for you, and say, hey, got your renewal, it's time to do this. Lastly, we're a local agency, right? We're serving businesses throughout Tampa Bay, all of Florida, in person and virtually. So we have an office. You can come into our office, you can meet with us. We can do a Zoom, we can do Teams, you can do a phone call, right? We can come to you, depending upon where you're located at. That's kind of where we're at. Next steps. Takes action today, right? Don't wait, right? So no cost, it doesn't cost you anything to review your policy, right? Schedule with me, give me a call, shoot me an email. We can set up a 30-minute commercial insurance review. See what's going to be the best for you. Bring a copy of your current policies. We're going to need those, right? We can see if there's any gaps. We can see if you've got great coverage. I can tell you right now, I had a client who looked at their policy last week. Oh, keep what they've got. They've got a great policy, right? They've had it for 7 years. It just happens to be the best in the market for them. And then meet us your way, right? Personally, virtually, at your convenience. The best time to review your coverage is before you need it, not after you've had the loss. Once you have the claim, if you don't have the coverage, you don't have it, right? We'll identify those gaps, we'll remove overlaps where you might be paying for extra coverage. We'll shop the 40 plus carriers, and we'll hopefully you'll walk away with a clear, actionable coverage plan, right? That's it. That's all I've got. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer those. Let me go ahead and stop sharing this here. And then if anyone has anything, then I'll answer those. Any other questions come in there, LaDonna?
Not right now.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you guys, my name's Wes King. I'm with We Insure Premier Group. I'm the agency owner. Best way you can reach us, you can go through our website, weinsurepremiergroup.com, or you can give me a call directly at our office, 813-535-9520, and we'd love to help you out.
Thank you so much, Wes. I'm actually, our company and me personally is a client of his, and I can tell you, like, when I have questions or anything like that, he's surprisingly always available. I think I've even like texted him at like 10 o'clock at night, like, I need a copy of my policy. So he's been really awesome. So this has been another webinar from the Foxy Business Hour. Please don't forget to like, subscribe. If you have any questions for Wes, put it in the chat and we'll be happy to pass your information on to Wes. Again, thank you all for watching and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, LaDonna.